Welcome to Swing Pass, everybody, as we get set for the Division Championship games across the Ultimate Frisbee Association. Huge weekend ahead, and excited to talk about the first round of the playoffs and what's coming up the next couple of days. I'm Evan Lepler. Unfortunately, Adam Ruffner unavailable this week due to a personal issue, but we hit the emergency glass to bring in Ian Toner, our analyst extraordinaire, to talk about everything that's happening this weekend. Ian, you'll be with me in Atlanta on Friday and in Boston on Saturday. And I think it's fair to say, and I've thought a lot about this, this is the best multi-city Frisbee weekend of the year. Like, championship weekend is still special, but division championship games, the top 8 teams, everybody battling for the right to make it to Breese Stevens Field, this iconic championship weekend destination in Madison. And like the contrast of emotions that you know you're going to see at the end of every game, it's just going to be a fantastic weekend.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Our best wishes to our buddy Adam. I can't disagree with you. I think sometimes, we get lucky a few weeks in the regular season, right? There are some races unfolding in multiple divisions at the same time. And hey, there's a couple East and South games that are great on a Friday and Saturday, or South and West games that are great. But I mean, this is kind of all basically as good as it gets. I'm with you. This is peak UFA right here coming up this weekend.
And there's just a finality to it because 4 teams are done and the other 4 teams have this all expenses paid trip to like Frisbee Paradise, the capital city of Ultimate, with a chance to win a championship and just great accommodations and like the whole championship weekend experience. It is interesting that like obviously we got 8 really good teams, and I think there's some skepticism about San Diego, just because people don't know. Like, they haven't been in the playoffs the last couple of years. They're in a new division. I don't feel like we really featured San Diego a ton during the season, so I feel like they're a mystery team. But you look at their 2 regular season games against Atlanta, they were incredibly competitive in both. Losing at the buzzer and a Hail Mary, Dean Ramsey in the first one. And then on the second night of the back-to-back, after they had beaten Carolina in double overtime the night before, like they played the hustle really tough on the road. I think Atlanta had 5 total turnovers with 2 minutes left in that game, which just speaks to how well Atlanta had to play to beat San Diego at home when the Growlers were on the second day of a back-to-back. So, but like every other team besides San Diego, I think you could make a real case. Like, the layman fan could say, yeah, this team could win the championship. Like, maybe the one team you'd say that's not in that league is Minnesota, but we know what they did last year, so I'm afraid to count them out. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where to start there. I'm with you on, maybe folks not appreciating what San Diego did, but the caliber of play and the level that they rose to against Atlanta, who we all regard as a top championship contender, can't go ignored. The fact that they got that crucial victory over Carolina, a team that many of us believe is just as good, if not better, than some of these other playoff teams. I think that speaks to what this team is capable of and how seriously Atlanta has to take them. I do kind of question Minnesota a little bit. I have a ton of faith in their defense. I don't have quite as much faith in their offense. We can dive into that conversation a little deeper later on. But I think it's going to be a lot to ask, and part of that is circumstantial, right? Because we've seen Chicago beat Minnesota so handily multiple times already this year. If they were going up against a different opponent with a different kind of matchup, maybe I'd feel differently. But I actually feel a little more confident, or feel like San Diego has slightly better odds in its matchup than Minnesota does against Chicago.
Yeah, I understand why you say that. One thing that's percolating in my mind is San Diego is the only team that has already proven they can win a road game in the playoffs because they're the only 3 seed that advanced. And Yeah, I mean, I do want to get into each game individually,
Sure.
but just because you mentioned Minnesota, Chicago, like, there's just something about Chicago that has me on edge. And I may feel silly saying this because they might win by 12. But man, I don't know if they're going to have the right mentality for that game. And Minnesota showed last year they have the resilience of a champion. And I just don't think it's going to be straightforward. Maybe it's wishful thinking and just me wanting to see a really great game. Um, Maybe it's the way I watch Minnesota kind of just totally dismantle Madison. And like Madison didn't play atrociously for most of that first round playoff game. Minnesota played their best offensive game against an above 500 team of the season, and that I would say they played much better offense in that game than they did in the game when they beat Atlanta. So like Minnesota has playmakers. They've shifted some pieces around. Things have changed, but yeah, 30,000 foot overview of the weekend. I love how the schedule orchestrates. Like we got Friday night frisbee, free to watch for everybody. San Diego, Atlanta, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. It's like this cross coast showdown, the third meeting of the year. But like Atlanta and San Diego had never played before, and they're not rivals. But you play somebody 3 times in a season, and it gets a little spicy. And there's going to be some extracurricular chatter, I would think,
I'm
especially with Khalif.
Yeah. Oh, I would expect Khalif to be vocal, to be impactful. I do want to go back to kind of the first part of your thought there when you were talking about being uneasy when you're feeling out where Chicago is and not thinking that's straightforward. I'm not asking you to reveal any sources. Is that just like personal observation? Have you had conversations with folks in or around the team that are kind of informing that? Like what gives you that sense?
I mean, there's a huge difference between club frisbee and pro frisbee,
Okay, yeah.
and both in personnel and style and everything. But let's just say I was underwhelmed watching Chicago men's ultimate
I,
this past
I
weekend.
don't think you were the only person, but yeah, continue.
There's also like they came Nate Goff and Tim Schock and Paul Arders and a bunch of other guys that came back to the UFA after Minnesota won because they're like, we can't let this happen again. So like that was kind of the mindset. And then they just destroy Minnesota twice during the season. I think it's natural to let your guard down a little bit, even if you say all the right things. Like, is Chicago expecting a war, or are they expecting to just roll? Because that's what happened twice in the regular season. And I know Donde Murray is the most talented player on the field, and he's a really special talent. I do think Minnesota's going to have a better game plan for him this time around. Like, I'd be very surprised if Justin Burnett guarded him. Clearly, that didn't work out. Burnett's a block getter, and in the words of our mutual friend Brian Jones, like Donde Murray is not the type of offensive player that you put a block getter on.
Yeah.
Um, so seeing what Paul Krennick did to Anthony Gutowski, holding him without a goal for the first time in his UFA career, the league leader in goals this year. Like, this is not me saying that Krennick is going to neutralize Donde
Right.
Murray, to be totally clear. But I just think Minnesota has some levers they can pull. I think Minnesota is going to come out desperately trying to prove they belong. And I think Chicago's going to show up expecting to roll. And look, I know you and Charlie First, their head coach, are buddies.
Yeah.
I know that I respect their coaching staff. One of the biggest things Chicago did this year was adding depth to the coaching staff. Like Dave Woods, he's fantastic. He's done a great job culturally with that program for years. But he'll be the first to admit that like he isn't a completely well-rounded coach. So they bring in Charlie, who's kind of like this GM, CEO, overseer. They bring in Cullen Geppert to engineer the offense. They bring in a defensive coordinator that everybody has absolutely been raving about. And goodness, his name is eluding me. What Eric Delgado is leading the defense. And like, I mean, after the last Minnesota game on the 4th of July, uh, Charlie first came up to me and he's like, this is all Eric. Like, Eric knew exactly what to expect from Minnesota, trained our guys. Like, so there's a depth to the Minnesota coaching staff that they don't have, that they haven't
Chicago,
had in the past.
Chicago coaching staff.
Thank you. Yeah, the Chicago coaching staff. Um, and despite all that, like all the things that you can say leading into a game, I just wonder, are they expecting a war or are they expecting to just crush? Because if you show up expecting to crush and you get punched in the face first, it can be hard to respond. You can get caught off guard, you can stagger. Maybe this is a narrative I'm concocting in my mind, Ian. I might be a little crazy, but I have seen more Minnesota wind chill games than in person than any other team this year. I saw them 5 times, including the playoff game. And, I respect their coaching staff too. I respect their veteran leadership. I respect their young talent. And I definitely didn't plan on going this deep in Minnesota, Chicago right off the bat. But this is the nature of the podcast. This is what we do. We just kind of ramble our way around the league.
I hear what you're saying. There probably is a world where what you're talking about is possible, and I think even with that possibility, I think the questions about Minnesota's O-line and its ability to execute under pressure and have that confidence and belief against a really, really talented defensive group and well-prepared and well-scouted D group like Chicago's, I just don't know that I have the belief in that group to get it done. And not because it doesn't have great individual pieces, just because, frankly, it didn't inspire confidence in the regular season. They made some adjustments and obviously looked stronger against Madison. And no slight to Tim DeBile and his group. We know how innovative he is as a defensive schemer. But, going up against Madison schemes versus Chicago's D-line preparation and their relatively stronger athleticism on defense and field sense on defense, If we'd seen, a sustained second half push and improvement from the Minnesota O-line from the, second half of the regular season onward, I might be singing a different tune. But to say, oh, yeah, that one game against Madison that solved all their problems and they're going to be ready to handle the Chicago defense, I just don't fully buy that. And reasonable minds can disagree. That's just kind of where I net out.
No, I mean, to be clear, I'm not saying that I expect Minnesota's O-line to pitch a perfect game or anything like that. Like, that's,
Yeah,
they are not a brilliant offensive team. There are issues there. And they're missing Quinn Snyder, who's over in China playing, getting ready for the World Games with Team
right.
Canada. That's a
Yep.
loss. I really like Gordon Larson.
So do
I
I.
really like Bevon and Thomas Shope. Shope switching on to the O line, I think, has been a great button that the coaching staff pushed.
I agree.
Um, you know, it's weird. Like, the questions I have are the championship weekend MVP Will Brandt, who played his best game of the season in the first round against Madison. So coming in with a little more confidence. I know he was dealing with an injury previously, so he's had a couple of weeks to regroup after that. Matt Rader was shaky, and it's strange to say that because he's just been such like a dynamic rock for so long. But like he had some decisions in that game that were just like too casual, too careless, and not befitting a player of his stature. And I don't expect him to have two iffy games in a row. I think he's still a very capable, solid playmaking downfield guy for a good team in this league. He just turned 34, but big game player. Greg Cousins coming off a really good game. So yeah, I mean, again, maybe this is just me talking myself into it or wanting to believe it's going to be a close game. I also think like Chicago's offense is still a work in progress too.
Yeah, that's fair.
And this is a team that hasn't had a really competitive down to the wire game since
The
Atlanta.
Atlanta game, that was what was coming to my mind.
Yeah,
Yeah,
their second game of their season, the last weekend of May.
yeah.
So you know, look, Chicago's got a good defense, and you know, from their defensive playmakers like Jake Reuben Miller, and William Wettengel. Their defensive handlers like Pavel and Xavier Payne, Victor Luo if he's active. Like this is a really good. This is a team that could go undefeated and win the championship. And to be clear, I picked them in the Tuesday toss. I expect Chicago to win the game, but I I think and hope it won't be as straightforward as the regular season games. Look, I made the case. We'll see what happens.
My
Um,
only responses to that are I love the call outs that you made about Chicago's defense. I don't know that in the offseason I imagined Wettengel and Payne being as impactful as they have been for Chicago's D lines. Like, and maybe that's my own ignorance and not enough of an appreciation of the skill set that they brought to Indianapolis previously. But I've been so impressed with what they've done. And the only other thing I'll say, and again, I'm sounding like a Minnesota hater. I have endless respect for that program, everything they've done. I know there are a ton of talented guys. You started dialing in on, hey, I don't know about Raider, or hey, I like this guy. I love Brian Vinoka. I don't know if I have full faith in Bivon in this game. I want him to prove me wrong. A couple of turns in both games against Chicago in the regular season. Some of them really kind of head scratchers that I know he's capable of like avoiding, but I don't know how much of that is just simple execution, how much of that is feeling the pressure. And he's someone that offense relies on a ton. And so I'd love to see it cleaned up, but I don't have full confidence. I love his game, want him to do well. Just a little curious. But we can move on from Minnesota, Chicago, unless you got any other.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, I think it's. I mean, I think that's an interesting point. Like, I get it, and I think that Bivon has shown in big games throughout his career. Like, I think of some of the plays he made in the air against Salt Lake in
right.
the semis a couple of years ago, and
And I say all
uh,
this, and he's got a career high completion percentage this year. So, like, if he plays to that
yeah.
level, then what I'm saying is irrelevant.
Well, yeah. I mean, he'll be 35 in November, but he's in incredible shape. He's a gamer. I got really, really terrified and angry when I thought I saw him get injured
Yeah, yeah.
last week, and then he came back and helped his team win the game, and just did Bevon things throughout the weekend on the club field. So
Yeah.
expect that he will be ready to go
And just
in this
just to
game.
correct myself, career high completion percentage in the playoffs this year so far. But anyway,
Yeah, well,
continue.
small sample
I know,
size, but
I
yeah.
know.
Um, anyway, the point I was going to make, and then we went on like a 10-minute tangent, which I know it drives Adam crazy, and I apologize, Adam, if you're listening. Uh, the schedule for the weekend shapes up just super nicely with the Friday night Frisbee game and then the triple header. The only thing that could ruin things would be like a lightning delay in Boston.
Sure.
And that, of course, I'm going to speak it into existence now because the weather on the East Coast this weekend has not been, or this week has not been tropical or glorious by any means. But yeah, DC Boston, 5 o'clock Eastern. Ian, you and I will be there. The Minnesota Chicago game that we've dove into already, 7 Eastern, 6 Central, and then Oakland Salt Lake, 7 p.m. Mountain, but that's 9 o'clock Eastern. So it's amazing how it works out. Everybody watches the game on UFA YouTube on Friday, and then hopefully everybody has their watchufa.tv subscriptions for this Saturday triple header. And the semifinals are also just on watchufa.tv. So, on August 22nd, you're going to want to have those subscriptions good to go for those games in Madison, and just what's going to be a really awesome weekend. Let's talk a little bit more about the South game. The Atlanta Hustle are hosting this game for the third year in a row. The Atlanta Hustle have never made it to championship weekend. How much do the ghosts of past devastation hover above the field in your mind when you think about the Hustle hosting San Diego in the South Final on Friday night?
I thought it was really fascinating reading about in the Tuesday toss the exercise that Coach Tuba Benson Jaja and the rest of the staff put everyone through. Hey, we're going to rewatch some of those games. We're all going to be able to witness it together, and we're going to be able to express emotion, and we're not just going to pretend it's this thing in the past that we don't want to talk about or we don't want to revisit. I think the fact that they've gone through that exercise and named it, I think that's hugely valuable, hugely impactful. Ultimately, we're not going to know how important that is until, they play the game on Friday night. But I think an exercise like that is really brave, and I think it's something that will help the mental resilience and fortitude of the group. It's inevitable that it's going to be hanging in the air, and everyone's going to be aware of it. I've checked in with a couple guys, and everyone has expressed, as you would expect, just real confidence. No one on the Hustle that I've been checking in with is, uncertain. Well, we got to figure this out. Well, if this can go right. This is a group that feels like it's done what it needs to do to be ready for this moment.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt they have admirably faced their past failures in difficult and meaningful and pretty special, extraordinary, not normal
Yep.
ways. Um, which is cool, and I respect a lot. Uh, and and I wonder, you know, if the score is San Diego 14, Atlanta 12 with 4 minutes to go in the third quarter, just what's going on the sidelines? What are the vibes like? I mean, you've been around this sport a long time, and in this league, especially in the playoffs, nerves creep up
Oh,
in weird ways. I'm thinking about another South Division team that was snake bit, and you were with me in Dallas
yeah.
in 2018, and it looked like the Flyers had it won. They were going to finally beat that Roughnecks team. Uh, until it all fell apart with just disastrous end of quarter sequences, and Dalton Smith getting the block on Jonathan Nethercutt on the goal line when it looked like the Flyers were going to tie. And there are some real parallels between the 2025 Hustle and, say, the 2018-2019 Flyers. And it's just a question: can the Hustle get over that hump in a real meaningful way? And I don't think the Growlers are going to give it to them. San Diego's offense and what it has done down the stretch. Talked to Kevin Stewart earlier today, and they hadn't played, in his words, a complete game all year until the Austin game. And it was so satisfying for San Diego because all the pieces kind of finally came together, in terms of taking care of the disc and playmaking and defensive pressure and team mentality. So San Diego is coming to this game clicking on all cylinders. They are the best version of themselves. We'll get to Boston in a moment. Boston has a lot of questions. They're really talented, but they are not humming down the stretch of the regular season. Like San Diego right now is the best version of themselves that they've been. And if you think about it, Toner, like Atlanta played 9 games in the first, 7 weeks of the season, something like that.
Yeah.
And they've only played 3 games in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
So that's something I've thought about too with this hustle team. And I'm not just trying to be Mr. Skeptic of all the top teams. I just try to think about all the different angles. And yeah, I think, Atlanta's ceiling, obviously, they are the better team if they play well. But, you know, the last time the Hustle played was July 12th. That was a month ago. Um, so, so yeah, we shall see. I'm interested also to see with the Hustle the lineup that they have all their offensive weapons. You know, Austin Taylor is going to be a really important playmaker, obviously. The big four is Taylor, Holzmeyer, Adam Miller, and Hayden Austin Nab. But then, like, all of their secondary guys, if you want to call them that, from Christian Olsen and Jeremy Langdon and Cameron Brock and Alec Wilson Holiday and Carl Eckwurzel, like, all those guys are O-line guys. And I know that Tuba is planning on embracing the fact that they have 10 or 11 O-line guys and crossing Brett over on D, crossing Adam Miller over on D, maybe even trying to get Austin Taylor out there on D, not because they think Austin's going to get 3 blocks, but on a turnover, if Austin's on the field, he can really do a job alongside Lucas McClamrock and Dean Ramsey and the other D-line guys that they have. But I do like they don't have like just an 8-person O-line and it's going to be 7 of those 8 guys every time. Like they're going to have to be tinkering and making adjustments and figuring out who's going to get where on these certain, number of points. And like, so that is something I think is an interesting question. Sean Cannell is another guy on that O-line that I didn't even mention, back from injury, a guy that they really think can be a huge downfield initiator for them and, a veteran of big games in the past as well. So, yeah, I mean, Sean Cannell, one of 2 guys on this roster that's played at championship weekend before, along with Cameron Brock. San Diego is the far more experienced team in terms of guys that have been at championship weekend. So, I mean, I've just thrown a lot at you. What jumps out
Yeah.
at what I just ran through?
As I think about your comments about it, I just don't think it's going to be that complicated for Atlanta to figure out which 7 to send out for O. I feel like this is a group that has a good sense of its sets and has a lot of, veteran experience and trust. And I don't think that's going to be that complicated for them to deal with. Maybe I'm wrong. I guess the other thought that comes to mind is, talking to some of the guys on the Growlers, I also get a sense that this group, while, you were talking with Kevin Stewart, he was so happy how things really seemed to come together for almost the first time in that Austin playoff game. I'm getting the sense that this group is a little more prepared for this West Division Championship game compared to, say, the 2021 West Division Championship.
West Division or South Division?
Sorry, compared to...
You're not the first to make that mistake.
I know. Old habits die hard.
Yes, indeed.
So this, anyways, I just get the sense that there's been a little more focus on the opponent, intentional scouting and game planning. There's only so much and so far that kind of prep can take you and do for you, but it's encouraging to hear, guys who've been there from 2021 and are still here in 2025, noticing that and appreciating that and feeling motivated about that. I still think Atlanta's the favorite, but, San Diego's playing with house money. They truly have nothing to lose. They've really done a job getting themselves here. They've earned the right to be battling for this opportunity, and they're going to have a very different mindset a more, I would think, free flowing mindset than Atlanta's going to have coming into this game.
Yeah, I like what you say about San Diego playing with house money. And look, they've got so much experience. Maybe I'll get my act together and like figure out, the number of total games that San Diego's 20 have played versus Atlanta's. And obviously Atlanta has Cam Brock, who's played more games than anybody in the league. But just like, a guy like Max Hume just played his 100th game in Austin. Jesse Cohen Friday night's going to be his 90th game in the UFA. Like, obviously, Travis Dunn is Mr. Growler. He's going to be playing his 121st game, all in a San Diego jersey. And you just kind of run down the list of, Kyle Rubin, Michael Tran, Daniel Brunker, Marcel Osborne. Like, these are, Khalif as well. Khalif has been a journeyman. He's bounced around, but he is a playmaker. He is a gamer. The fact that he played 3 games with Atlanta in,
Right.
2022, if he doesn't make that World Games team, he has a very different hustle
Yeah.
experience, I think. But, he is former hustle. He played and practiced with several of these guys. So it's like San Diego's a really interesting mix of all these veterans with these young, talented playmakers that I think the rest of the league may not know too much about. A guy like Max
Yeah.
Gibson,
Yeah.
who I wrote a little bit about. Ollie Artis kind of subtly has like just become an O-line stalwart. He's 6'2", 6'3", 26 goals, 11 assists, solid deep threat, but is capable of hucking the disc himself. I just think, look, it's hard to say because neither you nor I believe, have seen the Growlers in person this year.
Right.
And you got to see them last year, right? I didn't even see them last year,
I did.
so I haven't seen.
I did see them
I
last
haven't.
year. I think it was kind of at a point in the season where both San Diego and Colorado were already eliminated from the playoffs, but
Right,
I
right, right.
think, yeah, it might have been the last game of the regular season for both those teams. I could be wrong.
Yeah. Well, we should spend a few minutes on Colorado at some point too. The team that we used to call the Summit. Um,
Hmm.
uh, yeah, I think it's cool what San Diego has done. Yes, they are the underdogs, and like I think the universe, the Frisbee universe, is not necessarily taking them seriously as a contender, but I think this team is more
I, I'm,
well-rounded
I'm,
and talented.
I'm taking them seriously. I'm taking them more seriously than Minnesota for sure.
Interesting. I don't think that is the general. That's not my sense,
Okay.
but I could be wrong.
Okay. Yeah.
I
Continue.
could I
Continue.
could be wrong. Um, just going back to the Atlanta perspective for a minute. I mean, 3 times in the last 4 years, they've lost by one in the playoffs, and I mean, every game has its own story, whether it was New York in overtime at the buzzer,
Right.
Austin double overtime. Tuba still feels good about last year's game, like not obviously the fact that they lost it, but he's like, we played a great game. Carolina played a great game. That happens sometimes. Still agonizing to think about how that game ended with just, 60, 70 straight completions, whatever it
Yeah.
was, and Snell calling game, as the Flyers said on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Um, Michael Fairley said something on the sidelines this past week to me, and it was very much like an off the record comment, but it was basically like, if we don't win now, you know, I made a joke that they should consider folding the franchise. That's not going to happen,
Whoa.
obviously,
Whoa.
but but there's there's just such a sense of desperation and urgency deep down, and I know that they're not focused on that. They're focused on playing their best game and blah blah blah. I do expect Atlanta to win, but I also expected Atlanta to win the last 2 years, Ian. So take that expectation with a massive spoonful of kosher salt.
That's that's. I think that's you're totally justified to feel that way. Um, it, there's something about the way this team has been tested in the regular season, the way it's kind of, in a way, mildly exercised demons by definitively getting the better of Carolina, and making sure that group didn't make the playoffs. A team that obviously had tormented it, last year and at other points in its history. I feel more confident about that group. There's no doubt this is going to be in their minds. The history is going to be in their minds, but I feel more confident about that group now than I did in years past.
Yeah. When I was like getting ready to write the Tuesday toss a couple days ago, like I hadn't even started writing it. I was just thinking about like how I wanted to format it, and I literally started getting like a knot in my stomach just thinking about if I was on Atlanta, how I would feel in a close game late if like things go down that path again. Like
Yeah,
you need to be brave to be an athlete and to come back and to, put yourself on the line. And obviously, if it didn't hurt so much, then it wouldn't feel so good when you get over that mark, if in fact they do.
for sure.
And I expect them to, but yeah, it is, you know, like maybe Atlanta blows San Diego out, and like the whole fourth quarter is like just this kind of cathartic, like sideline, massive breath of relief. Like you feel the exhale, and then they get to move on to championship weekend. But I also think San Diego's better than that, and
Yeah,
they're gonna be competitive.
yeah, I would be surprised by that outcome. I'm thinking more something in the range of like Atlanta's hanging on to a 2 or 3 goal lead for much of the second half, and 19-16 Atlanta final, something in that ballpark.
Yeah, and then the fourth quarter is the pressure cooker drill that the Hustle do during the season, where the offense is up one, defense is down one, defense needs a break, offense can't get broken, and they kind of go back and forth with that mindset. Um, I'm guessing in the first round East Division game, you did not predict DC to be up by 14 goals on New York. Is that fair to say?
Sure didn't. I was actually kind of scoreboard watching with Breeze alum Jonathan Neely, and we were both kind of like refreshing the web page and the app at the same time. Like, wait, is this accurate? Is this right? And we were both at a wedding, and we got to a point where we could step away and like pull up watchufa.tv. We were like, oh my god, this is actually right. And to be clear, not that I was distinctly rooting for the Breeze. Jonathan was. I just couldn't believe that margin. That was kind of unbelievable. And I think, I don't know, man. Anything can happen in a single game. Talent can be great. Talent can have exceptional individual performance. I think there's something about a team that is. You talked about the Glory not necessarily humming well coming into the playoffs. There's something about a team that's generally on an upward trajectory, has great positive momentum, has been executing well for a period of time, and doesn't need like a momentum shifting turnaround game or performance. I just feel more comfortable about those teams that have, proven it, established it, kind of been riding their own wave that they've created through previous games. And of course, it wasn't entirely smooth sailing for them at the end of the season, given their loss to the Phoenix, but they did have things locked up. I'm just really impressed with what this Breeze team did down the stretch after how much it seemed like they stumbled out of the gates. And I think this team is in a stronger position uh, than any of us expected they might have been after 2 weeks of this regular season.
Yeah. Couple things. First of all, you and Neely are way more uh, polite, courteous wedding guests than I was when I was at my cousin's wedding on Cape Cod. It was the night after you and
Oh,
I did the Boston
yeah,
New York
that's
game
right.
in May. And so you remember New York went straight from there, overtime lost in Boston, up to
Yep,
Montreal,
yep.
where they lost in overtime. And, obviously I had the game on my phone as I was eating dinner, like sitting on a salt shaker. Uh, but, then dinner's over and it's literally like a minute to go in overtime or double. It was double overtime. So it was like the double overtime point. We're getting called up to witness the couple's first dance. Um,
Oh,
a month or so ago, my cousin sends me a photo of like him and his bride looking perfect on the dance floor, and me standing like in the circle of people holding my
oh
phone like a
my!
chump.
Really, really?
Yeah. So he asked what was better, their dance or the game on my phone. Um, so I told him the game their dance was far
I
more
was gonna. You
inspirational.
even stumbled over that answer there. Come on, man.
Yeah. I feel a little bad about it. I do. I don't think he'll be listening to this, but you know, they do live in Massachusetts, so maybe he'll come to the game on Saturday.
Okay.
Um, but anyway, yeah, you and Neely far more courteous wedding guests than me. One thing, Sam Rosenthal, the Boston coach, is a straight shooter, and he tells you what he thinks,
Love that
and
about.
he has interesting perspectives. And one thing he said to me when I chatted with him earlier today, just kind of asking for his general thoughts on the New York DC game, and he's just like, in this league, once your O line's out of gas, unless the D line can give them a reprieve, you're basically screwed. And like that's what happened. That's a really simple way of describing what happened to New York against DC.
Sure.
Like is DC double digits better than New York on the average day? I don't think so. But like DC had New York's O line's number, and it just it went from bad to worse, and New York didn't feel very confident in its depth, so they just kind of kept throwing those same seven guys out there more or less, and it got ugly, and DC was really impressive.
It was that was
Um,
interesting to see Jack Williams' comments about, hey, next season I'd love to see our strategy change and actually insist on getting an O prime or a different D line out there instead of continuously throwing the O. I mean, that sounded like a pretty clear, hey, this was a coaching mistake and I want to see something different next year.
yeah, and I agree with you, but I also want to be clear. Like my sense is that I mean, I don't know if Jack's being like our coaches screwed up because from where I sit, Jack has as much say over what happens, you know,
Mm,
in
yeah,
terms of empire
yeah,
strategy, game management as
I've
anybody.
heard that as well. Yeah,
So like, yeah, I mean, he's second guessing himself there as much as he's second guessing the coaching staff.
sure.
Uh, yeah, I mean, we Adam and I'm sure, could spend about several hours breaking down the Empire season and what their future could look like, and just there are issues there. Like there's talent, there's potential. They obviously have a lot of really good players, but in the tough division that they're in, they and they were kind of playing from behind all season long, and had, I mean, to be honest, like in some ways, making it to the first round of the playoffs for them. I know that they're not a team that you know they're not going to hang a banner for making the first round of the playoffs, obviously, but like they could have crashed and burned in week 10,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they got to the playoffs. So that in itself was something. In terms of DC at Boston, um, our buddy Brian picked Boston to win the championship. Um, in the Tuesday toss, I picked DC to win this game. I'm not asking you to be the tiebreaker by any means, but I'm curious, like, what are your big picture thoughts on DC traveling to Boston, a place where they did win this year? They beat Boston in the East Final last year in DC. Glory are as far as they've ever gone, like Atlanta. They've never been to championship weekend. Glory, started 8-0, have lost 3 of their last 4, but they had clinched. So, how much stock do you put into their
Do
losses
you do
at
you
DC and at New
do you,
York?
do you want to answer this, or do you want me to answer this?
The floor is yours, my friend.
So, just to be clear, the question is the tiebreaker on who's the favorite and a prognostication on who's going to win this one between DC and Boston.
What do you think?
I favor DC in this game. I think
You
that
favored. Wait, are you saying DC should be considered the favorite, or you lean DC?
I lean DC. I think their greater roster continuity and greater success through the second half of the season is going to give them a little more confidence and familiarity. And of course, a part of that success was beating Boston both in Boston and in DC. I think that's going to give them kind of a confidence edge as they head into this one. Of course, we can't ignore the fact that DC is going to be missing Thomas Edmonds, who's going to be competing
Right.
with Team Canada at the World Games. But
Game-winning goal at Boston
right,
in their game.
right.
Yeah.
You kind of hinted at this. I don't want to totally steal your argument or steal your thunder. It's just Boston. If you would have asked me who was the favorite in this game after 6 weeks of the regular season, 7 weeks, I definitely would have gone Boston. But since then, this group has had to deal with a lot of injuries, a lot of inconsistency. It's needed some real heroics from, Jeff Babbitt on the road defensively. It's needed guys to get healthy and come back into the lineup at the right time. I just their body of work in the final half or third of the season hasn't been the most confidence-inspiring output, and so there's no doubt that assemblage of talent can do great things on any given game, and maybe everyone will just all of a sudden turn it on and be clicking, and it'll be perfect. But I think that's the least likely outcome. I mean, even in their unbeaten streak to start the regular season, you and I worked that New York-Boston game. Their offense just kind of fell apart in the fourth quarter without any explanation. I think DC is a really great defensive team, both like tactically and execution-wise, and I have a lot of faith in how that group is riding its momentum, riding its improvement over the course of the season, and I think they should be the favorite going up against Boston. I'm not saying they're like, hey, DC's going to blow the doors off them going in there. We're talking. I think DC wins 6 out of 10 times if they play this game with these personnel, and Boston, of course, is right there. I'd love to hear your response to that.
Well, I'm going to respond to that with a question. And I'll start with this. When DC showed up to Salt Lake City
Yeah.
for championship weekend last year, they were the favorite.
Right.
They were the betting favorite.
No doubt.
The several years prior, when New York showed up to championship weekend, they were the favorite.
Right.
So if I gave you the choice, Ian, right now, you're picking a champion. You get the East Division champion or the other three teams at championship weekend? Right now, where do you lean?
Right now, I lean the other three teams at championship weekend. And I hope we get to the West Division soon, because it's kind of crazy that we haven't
We
said a
will.
single word about Oakland and Salt.
We will. We will.
Yeah.
We will.
But right now, I lean the other three teams. Yes.
That's like, I think I do too, just because I got a lot of respect for, Salt Lake and Oakland. I think either of those teams, if they get there, could win two games at championship weekend. I genuinely feel the same about Chicago and Atlanta. I don't know if I feel the same about Minnesota or San Diego, but I certainly didn't think Minnesota could do it last year. So again, my guard is up with them. Um, and I mean, the East Division winner has been the favorite at championship weekend. I mean, every year since the pandemic. Now, they haven't won it every year, obviously. Flyers beat the Empire in 21. Obviously, the Breeze upset and the Wind chill last year. But yeah, that thought occurred to me because I do think, like, I do think DC is very capable of winning the championship, and I think Boston, like Boston could beat DC by 5 and then win two games at championship weekend comfortably. Like they are that explosively talented, and we haven't seen all of their pieces together, healthy since like the very start of the season.
Right.
But
they're not. But those
and
pieces aren't all fully healthy right now.
well, I mean, Jeff Babbitt told me he's feeling good, and he looked good last week. And he can throw again, and he was really struggling to complete passes, not to complete passes, but to throw downfield, and he was limited the second half of the season. Uh, and yeah, I mean, look, Don Marais has rightfully seized so much attention. If Toba and Don switch spots, and Toba was playing against the teams that Don was playing against, with kind of the spotlight of the offense upon him, we could be talking about Toba in the exact same light. So I just want to say, like, Toba is an incredible player.
Yeah.
And yes, he's a little bit younger and maybe not quite as 100% polished and refined as Don, but like, I mean, I do think it's crazy that you can make a pretty good case that the two best players in the league are these two guys from Belgium.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
that are 24 and 21 years old.
Yeah.
Like, just how insane is that? That here we are. And there's a lot of other great players in the league, and we could debate that as well. But yeah, we should get to Salt Lake, Oakland, which is the last game of the weekend. But it honestly is the game that I think like has the best chance to go to overtime.
I agree. I agree.
I think Oakland. I hope they have learned their lessons from their Salt Lake regular season games,
Right.
Because in spurts in both those games, the Spiders look like a far superior team.
Right.
Like not just a slightly better team,
Yeah.
but a superior team. And somehow they lost both games. And the Shred, I mean, I don't need to tell you, like they just they have their system, and they play together, and they all row in the same direction, and it's a special thing they've got going. The vibes they've got now. I mean, you were with me for the Seattle game last year.
Yeah.
Like the vibes are a complete 180
Totally.
from last year at this time to this year. And it's hard to like totally put your finger on it and explain it, other than just like the pieces are clicking. The team seems to vibe better this year than last year for whatever reason.
Well, and I think, I'm looking at some of my conversations with folks around the Salt Lake program, and it just feels like that group was last year was feeling the pressure a ton. and was also kind of burnt out from the volume of practices that they were doing. And I think this group, the leadership group, kind of learned from that experience last year and adjusted the expectations and the commitment and kind of got more value per practice with a little less, a few fewer instances of those. And that's kind of led to this team being in a totally different headspace. Instead of showing up to practice field burnt out right before the playoffs, you're like, I'm chomping at the bit for the next rep to go battle against my D line or battle against my O line. I mean, I think these two offenses right here, either one would be the best offensive unit at championship weekend. And Atlanta has an argument for that too, if they're able to advance as well. But the way they utilize space, the way they play with pace, the way they put defenders on impossible islands, it's really impressive. It shows a high understanding of how to really maximize offensive leverage on the pro field. And they have tons of incredible athletes who can do it. Like, it's crazy to think about Adam Reese and Leo Gordon being rookies in the UFA.
Yeah.
We've seen all the young Energizer bunnies that and experienced veterans that Bryce Merrill has gotten to just pluck right in and be perfect fits for that offense. And even its D-line offense after the turn, which we know loves to run and gun no matter what. I don't know. I think this game is going to be the most high scoring. I think the casual fan is going to find this game the most entertaining because it's just going to be these incredible displays of offensive skill and talent and speed on display.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for the game too, and I think the offenses are special. I still think I would lean toward Atlanta's offense in their big four and all the veteran
That's
pieces that they
that's
put
fair.
around them.
That's fair.
Um, I mean, look, it's not this simple, and I like to be nuanced with the things that I say, and yet I'm going to say something here that is probably too simplistic. Uh, this game could come down to Evan Magsig
Yeah.
versus McKay Jorgensen,
Yeah.
and which of those guys of because those are going to be the two guys on their teams that have the disc in their hand the most, and just like which of those guys can play the more flawless game. Both have been really good. Magsig was flawless in the Colorado game. McKay Jorgensen, I mean, it was against Colorado on July 11th. He was 58 of 59. Then against Minnesota the next week, he was 59 for 61 with 7 hockey assists. And, just like the two games before that, he was 66 for 66 passing. So, like, I mean, I think even Bryce Merrill's kind of blown away by how good he's gotten this quickly as the youngest of the three Jorgensen brothers on the roster. And obviously Chad, is an MVP candidate, and Luke, since coming back from injury, has been a huge difference maker for their D-line's conversion rate. Yeah, I mean, look, there's just so many fun young players in this game to think about. Like, Carter Langford, young defender out of Cal,
Yeah.
got the first block on Quinn Finer against Colorado, like to completely set the tone. And they just, they have an army of D-line guys, and so does Salt Lake. Tony Mounga and Ben Ashton and Nathan Huff are the kind of the more experienced guys, but you think about what Kimball Pugh has done down the stretch of the season, big plays in every game. Nate DeMorgan, I mean, he is like a walking X factor in every game he plays in a really fun, incredible way. So, yeah, I think I think the fact that the game is in Salt Lake matters. I know it's not at Zions Bank Stadium, but it's a few miles from there,
Right.
and I think the Salt Lake fans make a difference, and I think that is going to matter in a close game. End of quarter situations. Referees are human, and the home field advantage is a real thing, and this is an Oakland team that is good enough to go in and make a crowd of 1,500 people shut up. Like they are that clinical offensively if they play their best game. Uh, the biggest thing that I alluded to earlier is just their their UFA centric decision making and game management, whether it's deciding when to roller pull, when to
Yeah.
double team, when to make the safe choice, when to go for it. There are just guys on this team that in high leverage spots that don't have the same number of reps as the shred, and like in a weird way, I feel like that was the difference in the two regular season games, and against perhaps my better judgment, I feel like that's going to be the difference in this game too. And yet I feel like it's like a 53-47, type game
Yeah.
with, the shred being slight favorites.
Yeah. I hard for me to disagree or add anything further. I almost wonder if I consider the Spiders to be favorites just because, like, in those games, they showed what they were capable of and just kind of like let it slip out of their fingertips. And that, I'm not dismissing that or ignoring that. I just think there is a universe where Oakland brings its A game and plays more complete four quarters and is tougher to get breaks against and doesn't have a prolonged hiccup. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah.
this is.
I mean,
Sorry, go ahead.
well, to support your point, uh, two-time UFA champion Eli Kearns will be playing in his first road game of the season.
Yeah.
He played in all 6 home games. He's a new dad. Uh, he joined the team kind of with a message that he wasn't going to travel.
Right.
It it sends a pretty strong message that he's going to Salt Lake City for this game. 1 week after he was out in Colorado playing club. Like there's also the fact that the Bay Area club team did pretty well this past weekend with guys like Kearns and Reese and Gordon. Different roster, but Walker Frankenberg, Dylan Whited, Robin Vickers Batsdorf back on the field, Daniel Ridaller, one of the most underrated players in the league. But it definitely jumped out at me that Eli Kearns was active for this game, going on the road for the first time, and Raquan Atkins, who only played 2 regular season games, but played in the playoff game. Solid, not spectacular, but like, I mean, everybody that you talk to about this kid, Raquan Atkins, just absolutely raves about him, and you know,
Look, and I know we're a UFA focused podcast, but given the kind of roster continuity in club, I was talking to some guys who are both Revolver team members. Of course, the team that you mentioned won the U.S. Open championship in the men's division this past weekend, and guys that are also rostered on the Spiders. And they said that tournament was kind of like the most complete performance that Revolver has ever had in their consciousness. And obviously, there's been changing of the guard over the past several years.
sure.
And that continuity translating over to the pro field, I understand we got different rules, we got different strategies, we got different opponents.
Different center handler.
Exactly. I hear all of that, but that doesn't mean nothing. And
For sure.
I think that's going to be a huge momentum and morale and confidence boost for Oakland going into this game.
So are you picking the Spiders?
The more I was thinking about your what'd you say, 53-47 shred. I think I lean like 53-47 Spiders. And that's, again, no disrespect to anything the Shred have done, because what Bryce has done to get this group back to this spot after the heartbreak of last year is nothing short of fantastic. And the
Toner, to me it sounds like you're oozing disrespect.
yeah,
53-47 against them.
yeah, that's what I'm going for.
So just to be clear, you lean Spiders, I lean Shred narrowly.
Yep.
Are we on the same page in the other three games? We each, we're not against the spread, just picking straight up, would have Atlanta, Chicago, and DC?
Correct. I feel the least confident about the DC Boston game, but I think you and I both do. But yes, those would be my lean, straight up, no spread involved picks.
Interesting. I just want to look up something real quick. If the four teams that I'm thinking are going to win, Chicago, Salt Lake, Atlanta, and DC, then the semifinal matchups would be Chicago, DC, and Salt Lake, Atlanta, which would be a rematch of that opening weekend tremendous game in Atlanta. If Oakland takes down Salt Lake, it would, the other teams being the same, it'd still be Chicago, DC, and Oakland against Atlanta. And Spiders hustle. That's never happened before. I guess DC Chicago hasn't happened before either. But these matchups could get thrown, with one upset. If Boston ends up beating DC, that changes everything. Although it doesn't. Boston or DC, unless San Diego wins, Boston or DC will be the lowest seed. So if Chicago wins, they will play the East Division winner.
Gotcha.
For sure.
Yeah.
Unless San Diego wins.
Right.
Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. It's going to be a fantastic weekend. Ian, hopefully the travel gods smile upon us. And I see you in Atlanta. And hopefully there's no flooding parking lot like there was last time we were in Atlanta.
Oof, goodness.
And then hopefully we can make it to Boston and, enjoy the DC Boston game, and hopefully there's no lightning delay, and then hopefully I can take you to my favorite New England Italian spot, and we can watch the other games on the iPad while enjoying delicious bread and pesto and other fine Italian cuisine.
How did you know I've been craving some pesto pasta all week? Sign me up, man.
Excellent. Thank you, Ian, for being a part of this spontaneous playoff preview swing pass. It's amazing how quickly an hour goes by talking Frisbee, and hopefully you're not sick of me because you got to spend at least 8 more quarters with me over the next few days, but we'll have fun.
Even if I was, can't wait for those 8 quarters and maybe some more free Frisbee to unfold. So thanks, everybody, for inviting me to be a pinch hitter here and for listening to me ramble as well.
Yeah, you hit it out of the park. The Divisional Championship schedule, 8 p.m., Free Friday Frisbee, San Diego, Atlanta, and then on Saturday, East at 5 Eastern, Central at 7 Eastern, and then the West Division at 9 Eastern. And by midnight Eastern on Saturday, we will have our championship weekend matchups, and we'll be 13 days away, less than that actually, from the semifinals at Bree Stevens Field in Madison, and the fun will really climax then. So thank you for listening to this podcast. Again, we're apologetic that our buddy Adam Ruffner couldn't be here, but we're sending our best wishes to Adam. For Ian Toner, I am Evan Lepler. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the Frisbee this weekend. And to honor Adam, don't forget, Frisbee forever. See ya.